This program is produced independently, made possible through private donations.
I call the meeting to order. Doug, can you read the opening statement?
Yes, all requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Wmrhsd Regional High School District Board of Education. Notice was sent to the Norris County Clerk and the clerks of the municipalities comprising the regional district, the Observer Tribune, the Daily Record, and the Star Ledger. Notice is also posted in the District Administration Building, Wmrhsd Central High School, Wmrhsd Menham High School, and on the Wmrhsd Regional website. Marcia Asdale.
Here.
Jamie Button.
Present.
Kristen Forrester.
Here.
Joseph Galida. James Johnston.
Here.
David LeBron.
Here.
John Meyer. Tom Richard.
Here.
Jackie Schramm.
Here.
Brendan Millick.
Here.
And Brian Riccardi.
Here.
You do have a quorum?
Thank you. Can we all rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good thing the camera wasn't on us. You said apple pie.
I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 13th, regular meeting. Thank you, Tom. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Jim. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes. Abstain.
Okay. I have a motion to approve the minutes from the February 16th special meeting.
So moved.
Who got there first? Marcia?
Give it to Marcia.
Marcia? Second?
Second.
Thank you, Tom. Discussion.
It's noted that Jackie Schramm participated via telephone. I recognize that was a executive session, but I think that we need to develop some sort of policy with criteria as to when members are allowed to participate by telephone. I remember there was a meeting last year where actually Mr. Wmrhsd participated and voted, and I believe you have to, I think you have to, well, New Jersey School Boards, I believe, recommends that you have a policy as to when members are allowed to participate via speakerphone, via Skype, and certain criteria that are set up. And, I just think it would be a good idea for us to look into that.
Is that in our new policy manual?
No, it's not.
Okay.
But I did go back, I remember listening to it at a podcast where they were talking about sunshine law and things like that, an open public meeting, and they recommended that you need a policy just to cover yourself. I know that they even said if you are going to allow a member to participate by phone or Skype, you actually need to go get a court order to do that if they're going to vote. So I'm not sure, I'm just saying perhaps we do need that if...
We've checked with Russ, with our board attorney, and what he's told us is that the statute allows for participation, electronic participation, which we've done off and on for a number of years, as long as there is two-way communication and that the entire meeting be available to all parties.
I listened to the same podcast. I heard the same thing. I remember they said they have to participate in the whole meeting, and they did mention court order. They didn't say that's not the law, but that was a possibility.
Right, they just say it's recommended you have a policy that lists criteria. So I'm just suggesting that perhaps just to cover ourselves and just look into that. So that's all.
Great, we'll take it through the policy committee. Any other discussion on the minutes, pertaining to the minutes? No, then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions?
Yeah, I abstain.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the February 22nd special meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Jackie.
Second.
Thank you, Dave. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, work session.
Okay. This evening, we're going to spend part of the meeting talking about art. And I think there's a good reason for that. There are two specific reasons. The first of which is that our students who are here this evening and some of the artwork that they have here have been entered into some of the most competitive shows in the state. These are juried shows, and they've won wonderful awards. And I think that's evidence of what the Mendham High School Art Department does on a daily basis. The second piece, I think, is even more interesting. You know that when Mr. Tattaker was here, he talked about the idea that as part of the new teacher evaluation, that we're going to need to be able to evaluate students in every subject. And when I visit roundtables, other superintendents say to me, but how am I going to measure something in music? And how am I going to measure art? And how will I measure business? And the fact of the matter is that because we have the IB, we have an externally assessed test and examination in every subject in this school that gives us a model. And so that puts us light years ahead of many other districts that are scrambling to try to find out, how do you really formally assess art? In fact, I was walking by the art room the other day, and Mr. Douglas was, an art teacher here at Mendham, was putting together what he called, he said, well, you know, I have a HESPA for art. And what he did is he put together a series of slides, and it was really more of a joke to me and the notion of testing, but it's a wonderful little set of slides that gives you a sense of, you know, art is something that we can test, and art is something that we can excel at. And we do both of those here in this district. So I want to thank the students and introduce Mr. Michael Wolf.
Hi, I'm Michael Wolf. I'm one of the art teachers here at Mendham High School, and I brought some of my students with me, the art department students. Oh, thank you, Dr. DiPattista, for inviting us to talk. There's two things I wanted to talk to you about. The first one I want to talk about, they don't have to do anything for, then they're going to talk about their work. One of them is to talk about projects we started last year, which was the graphic design classes, doing community-based projects for nonprofit organizations. It wasn't something I planned out, it just kind of happened. Some people came to us to ask us for certain things. There were certain competitions we participated in, and it ended up to be a really good thing for the graphic design students. They're participating in real-world projects where they're participating in design competitions where their designs are sent out to a board, sent out to an individual. We had some people come in to talk to the students, and then the work is selected. And if it's selected, then it's actually used out in the real world for T-shirts, brochures, promotional materials for various communities. This is one that Morgan Patusek designed for the New Jersey chapter of the American Cross last year. It's for the Rock and Red logo. Once a year, the New Jersey chapter of the American Red Cross has a logo contest, and it's for a summer concert series that they do. And she won the design. Actually, she submitted the design. From all the schools that submitted, they picked 5 finalists, and then they posted them all on Facebook, and then people voted on Facebook, and she was the ultimate winner. And for this project, her design was printed on T-shirts, tickets, any promotional materials that they had, they used this logo for. So it's out there, it's in her portfolio. She's graduating this year. It was something that she could really put in her portfolio and really show to colleges as something that's out there being used. This is something that Joan Bromhall, the Morris County clerk, it's a contest she does every year where she has students from all the schools in Morris County to design the cover of the Morris County manual. There's a cash award involved in this, so it's a real motivator for the students. And Julia Larrabee last year took 3rd place. And they also, along with we got to go down to the courthouse. They had a little ceremony for them. She was presented the award, and they took the first 3 place designs, they framed them, and they put them up in the office for a year, and then they switch them out for the next year after that. This came to us through the guidance department. Dr. Wmrhsd came to us, and the New Jersey Association for College Admission Counseling, they do a seminar down somewhere in the shore area, and they came to us and said, could we design the cover for the brochure this year? So save them a little money. And we had one of our senior students design this. He picked the typeface. He took their logo, which was just a black and white logo. He added color to it. He laid out the whole thing. Actually, the photograph is not New Jersey. It's a photograph he had from vacation. We just edited out the palm trees so it didn't look too much like an exotic location. But we didn't want him to use a photograph that he got off the internet, so he had the copyright for it. So he was able to use that. And he laid it out. And it was really a good project for him because we did the original design, he laid it out, we sent it to him. It literally went back and forth at least 10 to 12 times with them making suggestions, him making changes. A lot of it had to do with the way that the text and the wording of it. But they made some aesthetic adjustments too. So it was real world, just the give and take, going back and forth and getting it just the way that they wanted it. And then they used it it was professionally printed. So in his portfolio, he's studying graphic design now. I think he's at County College now, and then he's going to Tillicum four-year college. But it's something he could have in his portfolio, have the actual printed material in there, and it was a great experience for him. The Shift Nature Preserve, we started working with them last year. They had some kiosks that are in front of the building that they have, and they had just, kind of Xerox kind of pamphlets up there, and they wanted to do something a little bit more visually interesting. So we broke the graphic design class up into teams. They all worked in teams, and I think we had 3 or 4 teams. They all came up with different designs for logos, banners, everything that would go on the kiosk, and they actually liked them so much they took all the designs and are using them in different places and at different times. So they designed, they do a plant of the month, an animal of the month. They laid this all out for them. They made it so that we gave them the files so they could easily insert the text and the photographs into the files and switch them out every month. They came up with a series of banners for the kiosk. Here's the different designs for the animal and the plant of the month. This is another team's designs. And they were very happy. This is what it looked. This is not actually a photograph of the kiosk. This is photoshopped into it. But this is what it would look like in the final thing. And then this year I got an email from someone from the transition committee for Pitney Farms, which is property in Mendham Township that the township bought, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And they're deciding right now what to do with the property, so they want to develop a logo. So they came to the students, and the students are now, we had Mr. Slettenlind come talk to the students. He talked about the history of Pitney Farms. The farm's been in his family for over 300 years. His mother's still living at the house. She's allowed to live there until such time as she won't be there anymore. And it's a really great project for them where they could get to really dive into it. He offered to give a tour of the property and the house, and the students are going to take a little field trip there and then develop the logo and any other promotional materials that they would need. Okay? So that's one thing I want to show you. The next thing, the big reason why we're here is to show you the student work. And one of the competitive shows that we participate in is the Art Start Show, which is sponsored by William Patterson University. And it's a show where the art teachers in northern New Jersey pick a handful of their students' best work. They bring it to William Patterson. They hang it up in the galleries that they have there. This is the galleries that they have at William Patterson. And there's a couple hundred pieces of artwork there. But I wanted to show this slide for the professor who helps curates the whole show. This is where it says Art Start there. That's when you first come into the gallery off of the parking lot. These 5 works right in the front here, that's Mendham High School. They gave us the prime real estate. They gave us right when you walk in the door. The first school you see is Mendham High School. So I thought that was great. We also, as they have the show, they judge it. They have one of the professors look at all the work, and they pick best in various categories. And we took a few awards in that. And I'm going to introduce some of the students up here. This is a piece by Justin Beckerman, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about this piece.
This is a piece that I created using recycled fluorescent light bulbs from computer screens. I got the idea when I first opened up a computer screen a few months ago, and I actually played around with the light bulbs, and maybe because if you heat them up you can bend them, and I thought, why not create a sculpture out of these? They're so small, and they actually can be very bright or they can be very dim. And so I created this, and it's
You have to go over to it, Justin.
This is the actual piece over here, and this one's actually sound activated. I created the first one that just lights up when it's on at all, and then I thought, why not make one that's a little bit bigger and almost interactive? And so the light bulbs are suspended by metal poles that I painted, and the electricity flows through them. So the positive would be on the lower side and the negative would be on the higher side. And when I talk, there's a microphone underneath that picks up the sound and flows it through the light bulbs. And that's...
I wanted to point out, too, Justin's a sophomore, and he was in my semester sculpture class. I can honestly say I've never had a student like Justin, and I mean that in the most positive way. He's totally driven into. He loves to make things. He's always bringing in little videos on his cell phone, showing him things he's made. He came in last week, and he was making a flying. What's it called? Flying.
Hydrofoam?
Hydrofoam. And he took some foam from the tech department. I showed him some tools he could shape it with, so I gave him them, and he went home. By the next morning, he had on his phone photographs of the whole thing completely built. He had the foam shaped. He had the whole thing put together. He had the wiring on. He had the motors on. The wings were going up and down already. I'm like, Justin, when did you have time to do this? He goes, well, after robotics, after I did my homework, I had a couple hours, and he was in bed by 10:30. I'm like, he's just a great student to have in class. Okay, the next student I have is Michael Armando. This is his self-portrait. It's painted in egg tempera. One of our students is going to talk a little bit about some things related to our department. I won't step on what she's going to say. But there's a few things that we do in the art department that they don't do in hardly any other schools. I've never seen them done in any high schools. Egg tempera is one of them. It's a medieval technique where they actually use the yolk of the eggs mixed with pigment and then paint it on with a little tiny double zero brushes and paint on little tiny things. This is a small little painting, so it's kind of nice to see it nice and big here. But I'll let Michael talk about the rest.
Yeah, that's my self-portrait. Hopefully it looks like me. Yeah, so as Mr. Wolf was saying, you use the yolk of the eggs to actually make the paint, but we take like watercolor paint and mix it with the egg yolk, and that's how you get the paint to come out. It's painted on masonite, and basically that's how it was done. The colors are not really conventional. It's not really like human face color, but that's because I don't really like using the pigments of the face. I like going a little extreme. Background color, I chose green and blue because it contrasts pretty well with the orange and yellow, the red. That's basically it.
I also want to point out, if you didn't know Michael and what a nice, quiet, well-respected student he is, and if you just saw this, you would think he'd be a pretty intimidating guy, but he's a really great kid. He comes from a whole family of portraitists. He has two sisters also that are just amazing portrait artists. Okay. The next one is Isabella Kapoor. I'll let her talk about it.
I'm Isabella Kapoor, obviously. So over the summer, as part of the IB program, we have to do, if you're doing HL art, you have to do 3 large pieces to hand in at the beginning of the year. And after agonizing over it for a while during the summer, I decided to do paper cuts. So basically, I created images. I sketched them out in pencil first, and then I cut paper using an X-Acto knife and cut into the black paper and overlaid it on the white paper to create the image. And I wanted to explore illustration in this way because I thought it would be interesting to do images of books out of paper, since obviously paper is kind of the way that the particular type of art in terms of writing is conveyed. I wanted to do the same thing but with the illustration. So I used a poem by Edward Lear from the 1800s, and then I tried to make it the same kind of graphic black and white image that you would find in a book of that time, but as you can see over there, much larger and encompassing the entire poem as opposed to just one small part of it.
Really one amazing student after another. Apparently, I've been telling her, that's her sister, her twin sister Sophia, right next to her. Apparently, I didn't realize I tell a lot of stories about them at home. The other day, I was saying something about them, and my daughter said to me, "What are you going to do when Isabella and Sophia graduate?" I was like, "Well, I still have Justin and Michael, so they're going to be here a while." The next student is Sophia.
So this is actually a bronze sculpture I did during my junior year. I'm a senior now. But if you're in IB Art, you have to take 2 years of art, junior studio and senior studio. And so in our junior year, we get to explore a lot of different mediums. And this is one of the ones I actually enjoyed the most. It's bronze casting, where you first make a sculpture out of wax, and then you cast it in the bronze through a somewhat complicated process that would take a little too long to explain. But so you mold the wax, and you need heat to mold it, and then you cast it and melt out the wax and pour in the bronze. And you get a piece that's a little rough around the edges and kind of polish it up and finish it up in its bronze stage. And the idea behind this one was actually I'm working on a concentration having to do with music and dance and expressing that through art. So I did this one and one other piece that are supposed to kind of be like breakdancing. And they're supposed to be very animated and dynamic, even though they're, a still sculpture. So yeah, that's about it.
The story that most impressed my daughters, though, was the fact that they're big Harry Potter fans. Sophia's band played at the Quidditch World Cup, so once I said that, she was totally impressed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dana Barlow couldn't be here tonight. She also took honorable mention for black and white drawing, and her collage you'll see again is this is piece over here, the portrait with the very colorful one, the second one from the right. That's all little tiny magazine pieces cut out very carefully. She has an amazing work ethic, and she must spend hours and hours and hours. She's very detail oriented and does amazing pieces. Okay, so this is the Morris Museum show. The Morris Museum show is the hardest show to get student work into. I would say, I don't know how many hundreds, but at least 300 or 400 pieces, maybe up to 500 pieces are dropped off every year at the Morris Museum, and they have an unusual system for doing it. On Saturday morning, we're allowed to submit 4 pieces per teacher. Saturday morning, you take everything there, you drop it out the door, they whisk it downstairs, they set it up. 4 or 5 hours later, the judges have everything judged. You go back, you pick it up, and they tell you what you got in the show. I don't know if you know, hopefully you know that the Mendham Art Department is really very well known as being one of the best around. And this show is so hard to get into. 3 or 4 years ago, I went to pick up the work, and I said, Mendham High School, and they said, nothing. I said, Mendham High School, and they said, oh, I'm sorry. And that was, I think, the only year that we didn't get anything. But this year, we usually average 1 or 2 pieces a year, but this year we got 3 in. So it was a really great year for us. And here's Dana's again. This is, she calls the busy state of collage. Again, it's thousands of itsy-bitsy little pieces of magazine that she glued together. I don't know how many hours she spent on it, but quite a few.
I think it was 30.
30? I think more, maybe. I don't know. Okay, this is Emily Niehoff. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
Hi. This is actually a picture that was taken of my sister Julia, and it was in the Outer Banks, and it was at the end of the school year, and I had finished everything because I work really fast, so I needed another project to do, and I really liked this picture. It was actually taken by my mom, and it was really interesting and striking, and so I decided to do a painting of it, and I never really, I was a sophomore when I did this, so I never really knew about what kind of painting style I liked, and I tried to be a linear painter, and it didn't work out very well, so I tried to do it more painterly, and I really liked how it turned out, and I had a lot of fun doing it, so yeah, that's it.
This style of painting, like a very loose linear, painterly painting like she did, is people think it's very loose. It looks like it's quick and easy to do. It's actually very difficult to do, especially with students. Students tend to be more linear and very controlled, and it's actually pretty hard to get students to paint like this, and I think she did an amazing job. And last but not least, we have Miss Sarah Tosh, who's going to talk about her bronze sculpture.
Hi, I'm Sarah Tash. So like Sophie said, I did a bronze sculpture as well. Like she said also, I wanted to do something a little different, a little less stagnant. And what's less stagnant than a person jumping off a cliff maybe, or jumping off a diving board, because I wanted to show something with a little more movement, and I wanted to express some sort of freedom feeling, because it was during the middle of the third quarter, and it's just you're at your wit's end, and you want that summer. So what better to show someone jumping into anything you want? You can picture water, anything, and I had a hard time figuring out what to do for how to hang it. We were what should we do? And for the longest time, we couldn't figure out how to do it. We were trying to figure out if we should put poles on the elbows and then we decided we should just hang it off a chain so it can swing. And that made it more into a kinetic sculpture, which is more like a realistic kinetic sculpture, which I really loved. And I found out later on that people were playing with it in the earlier classes. That didn't go with me too well. So that wasn't very good with me. But I really loved, this was one of my favorite things to do last year. I really loved it. There's something about working with the wax with your hands and being able to mold it into something really beautiful, and just being able to that work ethic. And as well, I went to a lot of portfolio reviews this summer, self-portfolio reviews. And every time they were so surprised how many mediums we were able to do in our art program. We could do sculpture, bronze sculpture, clay sculpture, printing, the egg temper. There's just so many broad ideas that we can do. It's really surprising because not many schools have that idea, and it's really great that we do. So I just wanted to add that in there. So here you go.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank you and Dr. Batiste for inviting us. And
I'm wondering if the board has any questions.
Can I take her class?
Yes. Do you plan to use your art in college?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
I definitely, yes, it's one of the things I'm looking to study, definitely. I'm probably leaning more towards music, but still creative, right?
Yeah, I am.
I'm not sure yet.
That was my question.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much.
That's pretty impressive.
Now to the other end of the spectrum. It's budget time. So, yep, whenever you're ready. Jackie Schramm is the finance chair. She and Doug will be presenting the tentative budget.
The West Morris Regional High School Board of Education will be approving the 2012-13 tentative budget tonight, as required by the County Board Office. Significant budget factors include the following. The 2012-13 budget will be under the tax levy cap. The district will receive $4,369,441 in state aid for 2012-13. That's an increase of about $313,000. Although it's an increase over last year's budget, it is still more than $1 million below the $5.4 million in state aid budgeted 3 years ago in the 2009-10 budget. Please recall that in the 2010-11 budget, 2 years ago, state aid to our district had just decreased by over $2 million in just 1 year. This necessitated drastic spending cutbacks. Although we've experienced small increases in state aid over the past 2 years, we are still well below the levels of state aid we received from 1998 until 2010, which was over $5 million in every budget year. After the budget was passed last year and the fiscal year began July 1st, 2011, the state granted additional aid to public school districts. Our district received an additional $458,000. It was decided to return a portion of that unexpected aid back to our taxpayers immediately, $184,000 in the 2011-2012 budget year, the one we're currently operating under. Therefore, the tax levy increase for the 2011-12 current budget year was eliminated. Taxpayers enjoyed a 0% increase this year in their regional district school tax levy. The $313,000 increase in state aid the district will be receiving in the new budget year, along with the $274,000 additional aid left over from last year, will be used to provide relief in the area of class size and property taxes. District enrollment is expected to remain flat in the 2,700 to 2,800 range for several years. This is a higher range than previously expected, as the demographer is allowing for the effect of long-range economic factors. Over the past several years, given reduced state aid, tax levy caps, and 2 defeated budgets, all of which resulted in budget cutbacks, knowledgeable and experienced district administrators thoroughly examined district spending to identify areas where further efficiencies could be made. The district is prepared to live in a 2% cap world going forward. Doug, would you like to continue?
Sure. I want to, Joe and Marcia will get a copy, and because Jamie has a copy already, and then this would be for Jim and Dave, because I believe Tom and Jackie do have a copy of this. This is the, tonight on the agenda is a resolution to approve the tentative budget, which will be submitted to the county office on March 5th. Between now and March 5th, I'll continue to work on the details of the budget statement itself. This coming Friday, I have a scheduled meeting with the county office, a business administrator, to review our budget prior to submission, and then on Monday we'll submit it. What I provided you with here is some highlights. Jackie's kind of touched on the state aid component of it, but some of the other highlights is what the so that you will know as board members what the tax levy will be. And as you can see, it's $39,285,434. And what the overall tax increase for consideration is 1.67% over last year, which again last year was flat. So that's $647,191 of additional dollars coming into the district aside from state aid. You can see our general fund appropriations have increased by 5.9%, $2.6 million. Primary source of that increase were our labor costs, as I've indicated below. The total budget is up 4.6 over last year. Total budget meaning debt service, IDA monies, and capital reserve outlay. The state aid utilization has increased 15.52, and the reason I use the word utilization is because we did defer some from last year to this year. There is an SDA assessment component of that. That increased by about $28,000 from the current year. It's going to be about $102,000 in fiscal year 12-13. And the dollars that aren't used for purposes of, there's, how do I want to say this? The cap allows you to use certain things like enrollment increases. There's a waiver for that. There's a waiver for health benefits. that we have forgone last year and again this year, and also because of the tax levy that was forgone last year, you have a bank cap of $1.1 million that could be utilized in a future year. I provided you with some documents. I first gave you the enrollments. I think that we ought to look at enrollments every year, and it's just, again, you know, the basis for why we're here is because we got kids in classrooms, and as you can see when you look at that chart, that our enrollment at the high school level is going to stay fairly flat over the course of the next 5 years. Behind that document is what I call the summary of revenue and expenses. I just gave you an executive summary of our sources of revenues and our anticipated expenses. And of course, they balance out. And if you look at the top box where it talks about anticipated revenues, and our tax needs for the calendar year are increasing by less than 1%, 0.72%, keeping in mind that school district's fiscal year doesn't match the municipal year, so we have a 6-month delay in calculating our taxes, and that's why you see that significantly low number there in comparison to our overall increase. And you see our overall increase, again, is from a tax levy standpoint is 1.67% on the revenue side, and then the detail at a high level is the expense side, which I already had covered. The next document, I wanted to give you an idea of where our surplus came from this year. Part of it came from state aid. Part of it came from extraordinary aid that we normally get every August. There was an audited surplus that was included in the total surplus for the year. And then we utilized a small amount of fund balance for, to balance out the budget. And then I also gave you a little segment on what the bank cap is composed of, just for your reference. And finally, the last sheet that I presented you with is again a summary, a level of the appropriations. I did not provide you with the detail at this point. I'd like to work with the county school business administrator before I finalize all of the entries in the budget, and then once I've submitted him, I'd like to provide that to the full board, all of the detail that is in there. Keeping in mind that we should have that done by the end of this week, and that on Monday I'll be submitting the budget. I would have those details completed at that point, and between now and the next board meeting, we are in a period of review by the county office. It's a tentative budget. It's not final until you folks approve it on the last meeting of the month, and I'm sorry, I don't remember what that date is. So this gives you a representation of where the dollars are, where we had increases, decreases as we built the budget for 2012, 2013. And I think the last thing I wanted just to mention to you on my memo, my closing paragraph, I had indicated that labor costs were the primary source of increases, and that when you look at the budget line for regular education or regular teacher salaries, it shows a significant increase in that line. But a large component of that is that we added a large amount of money for 6th period, for maternity leaves, as well as we've added one new teacher for the world language for Chinese. Those three components themselves have added $890,000 to that salary line. So when you look at that line and you see that it's at 1.7 million, 890,000 of that are new dollars we put in, and we did that as Jackie had indicated, not just for the Chinese teacher, but also, we have had a lot of maternity leaves, and we have to, when those folks are out, we need to bring somebody in to cover it. And the other big component is 6th period. In our strategy of building the budget, one of the things that the principals had asked for is, that they be able to help alleviate, and we've heard our parents talk about this, is that they'd like to alleviate class size. And this, what 6th period provides our administrators with is the ability to address that in a flexible manner. Any questions?
Yeah, Doug, I have a question. I was going to ask whether you have the detail backing up this summary, but I think I heard you say that you wanted to review it with the county business administrator first. You don't have...
The budget statement, yes. Yeah, because within the budget statement itself is that when you start making adjustments, what happens, it affects other areas of the budget. And so I wanted to finalize everything with the county BA. In the budget statement, he isn't going to see the detail. He will just see the I mean, you've seen the budget statement. It's a fairly, I would say, convoluted document. There's a lot of it that I understand, but I've been looking at it for a lot of years. It's not necessarily the clearest document.
Do you have the backup detail for the third page of this handout, which is the summary of revenues and expenses?
Some of the revenues and expenses.
Right, the detail supporting how you got to these line items, these few line items.
The tax revenue item, that is the top line, the tax revenue, that's a calculation that ends up as a result of the ability to increase by the cap amount and or lesser amount, which is what the committee at this point has devised is a 1.67% increase. The general fund revenue, I gave you on the next page. It shows you how I derived that. State aid number is there, 274 from 1112. The extraordinary aid, which we received over the summer, is 280,000. Audit surplus is 1.8 million.
Doug, I guess what I'm really focused on is the general appropriations item on this page that we have a summary for on the last page. Mm-hmm. My question is, do you have the detail backing up these?
That's the component that I would like to defer until I set in review with the county BA.
But this is on the agenda for the board to approve tonight?
Yes. It's a tentative budget.
Tentative or not, you're asking us to approve general items without providing the detailed backup for it.
And to keep in mind, it won't be official until you will see the document before you make your official acceptance of the budget.
Has the Finance Committee, Jackie, reviewed this document?
I saw it earlier today. We had a meeting at 6:30 you were invited to. And
when was that meeting called?
And it was called very late in the day, simply
Today.
because I was working on getting the information together. And it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I had aggregated my information so that I could send out a note and say, if you could join us, please do. If you can. I recognize it was short.
That meeting was from 6:30 to 7 tonight?
Yeah, it was, yes.
A half an hour to review a $50 million budget?
Doug, will you explain when you got the state aid numbers?
Yeah, well, I got them at 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon is when I got the numbers, which, of course, where we were Thursday evening, most of us, so I didn't have an opportunity to work. I worked on all day Friday. I worked half a day Saturday, and I worked a half a day Sunday trying to achieve this. In the meantime, I was also working on a superintendent's contract, for submission to the board. So I would have loved to have been able to have this completed for you, but there just was not enough time.
Sure. No, I understand that. I'm going to suggest that we defer it until the Finance Committee has time to review it and the board has time to review it, because right now we don't have anything to review.
We'll have to call a special meeting then in order to submit.
I suggest we do that. Again, it's a $50 million budget.
That's up to the board's discretion.
We rarely have all of the supporting detail when we are submitting a tentative budget. It's just that, it's a tentative budget. There are still opportunities for the board, another opportunity for the board to vote on final submission of the finalized budget, and we will have all of that supporting documentation before that vote. This is looking at the broad outlines. That's all we're supposed to be doing at this point, looking at the broad outlines of the budget, and as a tentative budget, submitting that to the county for approval. There are still other steps in the process and opportunities for us to get involved in the line-by-line detail.
Will that supporting documentation you're talking about be available at public budget presentations?
The detail?
Yeah.
Once I give it to the board, by all means. I mean,
So by the time it's being presented to the public, the board has then voted on it? Yes, is that correct?
It's being presented March 26th.
Yeah.
To us again for a final vote?
Yes, in a public meeting, yes.
And then in between now and March 26th, there will be public presentations of it?
The public presentation is March 26th.
Are you talking about the presentations to the municipal governing bodies?
Or just in general? I mean,
Normally, we have a public presentation at our board meeting. That will take place this year on March 26th. When we go to the municipal governing bodies, that will be after March 26th.
and one other question, did I miss seeing, you have your projections based on Weissman's January 29, 2012 report. Did I miss seeing that?
I'm sorry, I missed the
The
question.
enrollment projections are based on the demographer's January 29th, 2012 report. I don't remember ever seeing that.
No, you didn't, because I put that date in there, that's when she submitted it to my office.
So we haven't seen that
No.
report yet?
No. Well, this is it. It's a culmination of her report is what I've depicted here.
Well, I understand, but, I mean, she has a lot of supporting facts. I mean, I would assume.
She has one page that she submits to me.
Oh, okay, well, I've seen them in the past where she'll list, all the theories behind her,
Right,
but
right.
not this report.
No, and keep in mind, this is an individual who has never taken a fee for this work. I wrote a purchase order in fiscal year 2000 for her to do our demographic study for us. And I left that purchase order open for almost 4 years until the state said, you got to close it, because she would not submit an invoice. She's done all this work gratis for the district. And I found out that she's also done this for a number of other districts gratis. She does not charge for her work for whatever reason. And my sense of it is that it's so easy to her that it's very simple for her to pull this together.
Doug, there's been a lot of press recently about the number of students in Washington Township decreasing by 500 is a number that the press is writing about a lot. The projection that we have here shows Wmrhsd Central student population flat for the next 5 years.
Jamie, if I could just answer, the 500 student drop in Washington Township is a number that keeps getting batted around for a multitude of reasons that don't have a lot to do with education. The Washington Township Board of Education has done their own demographic study, and I believe that was linked on the patch a couple months ago. It does not show 500 student drop.
Okay, but just so we're clear, our demographic study that we're using as a basis for planning shows flat.
Correct.
Student population at Wmrhsd Central over the next 5 years.
Correct. And what was interesting is last year's study, we actually had a drop over the 5 years of 400 students, which of course caught my attention, and I communicated with Sarah Weissman. I said, explain to me why we have now gone back up to where it's a flat projection as opposed to a decline. And one of the things that Sarah doesn't just look at the kids in the seats, she takes into consideration economic factors. And her explanation to me was that her economic factor that she used has improved over last year's number. And her statistical, of course, which indicates that, that we'll continue to see, folks moving into the community as families age out of the system. So that was her explanation as to why we were declining last year and why we've gone back to a flat, which back in 2000, 2001, she had predicted about 2,700 kids and that it would level out back then. And there's been aberrations for over the last 10, 11 years of those numbers, but now she's come back again to that flat 5-year look ahead. So that's the reason.
Is next year the first year that Mendham has ever been bigger than Central?
I think there was one other year on the, keep in mind, these are enrollment projections and whether they actually materialize, because there's a lot of ins and outs between K-8 graduating kids, whether they come to the high school or they go on to private schools. That's a factor that has to be taken into consideration.
Does she anticipate that?
She does. She does.
And I think it is the first time.
questions?
Doug, I have a question. When we refinanced the local debt service, the bonds, wasn't the savings supposed to be a little more than $55,000?
It will be. It will be. As we go into the subsequent years, we'll begin to see those dollars decline. They spread it out, so that we would not have, a large change in those savings. But we will see some savings as we go forward.
Let's be about 80 or 90, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. Keeping in mind, I just want to make one more comment about the detail information is that, the full board will have that information well before the next board meeting. And that way you'll be able to, at that point in time, we can look at those line items that you may have questions about. And I would recommend that we probably have another work session for finance or for budget at that point in time.
Sure.
Full disclosure.
You mean March 12th?
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay. Continuing in work session, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our new superintendent, Mr. Mackie Pendergrast. No, I don't think it's turned off.
So this is not a requirement of the superintendent. It's working. If I could, that's better. If I could take just a few minutes, and I kind of like to address everybody here, because it is an important night, and for a bunch of reasons, but certainly one, Dr. DeBattista. And I would just like to take a few moments and thank him for his service since 1978 in this district. And Anthony has been a visionary administrator. He's called the big things right. The IB program, a flawless execution of construction, a real commitment to teacher quality. He is called the big things right. And I want to make sure that I say that before we move on here. But what I'd really like to thank Anthony for is something maybe some of us have forgotten, but I haven't. And that is, and I think Anthony is probably most proud of this, Anthony was a great, great teacher. Yes. And I should say is, but I'm kind of referencing 1982, which is when I came through the high school, and I was a student of Anthony's, and we used to call him to his back D, and then it became Dr. D. But Anthony really was a great inspiration to me in my life. And I took a couple of his classes, ended up in Western Civ. But I have a couple things I'd like to share because they are meaningful. I have a couple of distinct memories. One, and I don't know if I've shared this with you, Anthony, and this is probably the wrong time to share it to the world. But
sure.
I wrote an essay for Anthony one time, and I got a C on it. And I should say I earned a C on it. And I remember I went to Anthony. I ever told you this story? And I went to Anthony. And I said, why'd I get a C? And being a teenager, I was kind of indignant about that. And Anthony kind of laughed at me, which is not something I recommend to our teachers. But he said, quite frankly, Mackie, this really isn't that good. And he kind of laughed at me. And I was kind of upset. But here's what he said next. And here's why this is important. He said, Mackie, you want to be intelligent. You don't want to seem intelligent. I remember those words. He said, you want to be, not seem. And I don't think at the time that landed on me. But I distinctly remember when I was in college, it did. It did. And I think that's what great teachers do. And that commitment, that connection to kids is what this district has been about, and has been inspiring to me. So I think that certainly that's a value we have to hold dear. I became a teacher in part because I had many great teachers in high school. And when I was an alternate route teacher, which means I didn't have any formal training. I didn't have the classes or anything. I just kind of got thrown in there. And then I remember one of the classes, I was advised, well, just think about some of the great teachers you've had and try to be like them. And so I had in my mind certainly Anthony and also Gary Anderson. These are two people I had in my mind. I said, I'm going to try to take that infinite empathy and patience that they have and bring it into the classroom. And that didn't work very well for me. I got to tell you that. It's very hard to do, those classical Anthony qualities. But certainly Anthony's passion, his love for what he did is something that was easy to come by, and because I had that model. So I just, I want to thank you so much for everything you've done since 1978. And from my generation, just about teaching, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Because this is Mackey's moment. If I could respond. Those of you who were students of mine know that the one thing that I did that I loved was the Protestant Reformation meeting of the minds. And everyone got a character, and people in this room remember who their character was. And I had to think long and hard about each character. What I did with it was I made each person in the room somebody from the Protestant Reformation. And you had to fight it out for 5 days. You had to find out everything about that person, and be ready to fight. And I always thought really hard about two of the characters. I had to have the smartest person in the room be Luther, and I had to have the smartest person in the room be Calvin. And Mackey was one of the best Luthers there ever was. A good Catholic Lutheran. Congratulations.
I'll certainly take that as a compliment. I want to thank the board again. I've expressed this before for your trust. This district really is poised for great progress. There's so many great things in place, and I'm very eager, very excited to get to work and to work hard to move the district forward. I've lived in Wmrhsd for 40 years. Since 1972. So being selected the superintendent is very meaningful to me. And so I look forward to extending the conversation with everybody and building the relationship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mackey. I have one other piece of business. I have a proclamation honoring Dr. Anthony DiBattista for his outstanding leadership and unwavering dedication to the Wmrhsd Regional High School District. Whereas, Dr. Anthony DiBattista has been an exemplary educator in the Wmrhsd Regional High School District for 34 years. And whereas, during this time, he taught history at Wmrhsd Mendham High School for 20 years, served as the director of curriculum for over 7 years, and led the district as its superintendent for the past 6 years. And whereas, during this time, Dr. DiBattista was instrumental in bringing and establishing the International Baccalaureate program in the Wmrhsd District, helped expand the International Baccalaureate Initiative to all academic departments, and instituted the IB for All initiative. Taught IB Theory of Knowledge classes at Wmrhsd Central and Wmrhsd Mendham on a regular basis. Created the affiliate school program with the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History, and created sister school relationships through Gilder Lehrman with Newark History High School and Frederick Douglass Academy. Wrote the Teaching American History grants that brought $1.1 million of professional development to the district. Created a K-12 Chinese language initiative. Helped initiate monthly meetings with our constituent K-8 superintendents to discuss curriculum, transition to 9th grade, and shared services. initiated One Book, One District to encourage students, staff, and community to read Rocket Boys and create a community-wide discussion, created SAT preparation partnerships with the Princeton Review and free enrichment classes for our students taught by district faculty, led the district's long-range plan, completed management of the largest construction project in the history of the district that involved consistent hands-on presence on both construction sites, oversaw the largest set of budget cuts with an eye toward educational continuity and minimization of disruption in the history of the district, passed quality single accountability continuum, otherwise known as CUSAC benchmarks, and received accolades from the Executive County Superintendent regarding the district's CUSAC presentation, helped initiate and plan logistics for the Freedom Ride and student visits with Congressman John Lewis and the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, authored an Option 2 program for all juniors and seniors to gain additional study time if they met the academic requirements, was part of the team that wrote and had approved the award-winning professional supervision and evaluation system, helped create logistics for the initiation of the alternative rotating schedule. This is my favorite. Has consistently taken a lower salary than the board has offered and has successfully negotiated fewer vacation days for himself than any other administrator in the district. Served in leadership positions in various state and national organizations, including the Rutgers School Development Council, New Jersey Council for History Education, the National Council for History Education, Morris County Association of School Administrators, and the Artist Advocacy Foundation, and served as a member of the Morris County Prosecutors School Safety and Security Council. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the West Morris Regional High School District Board of Education recognize Dr. Anthony DiBattista with deepest appreciation for his outstanding leadership and unwavering dedication to our students, our staff, our board, and our communities. In witness whereof, I've set my hand and caused to be affixed the seal of the West Morris Regional High School District this 27th day of February, 2012. Would you like to make a motion?
I can make a motion to read this and accept this into the minutes.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions?
Oh my God.
Just in case. You forgot everything that was in there.
Oh my God.
Let me just say very quickly that 34 years ago, I walked into the Mendham High School library to begin teaching here. I was very nervous. I was very grateful that they took a chance on a long-haired, oddball guy that could teach history here, and I am the luckiest person in the world. And despite everything that's been written on that proclamation, which I thank you most heartily for, I am the one who has been enriched, and I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Thank you so much.
At this time, we are going to take a brief recess before we open to the public. We have cake for everybody, so please come. We'll take 20 minutes. Please come share. Thank you for sharing another cake for Dr. DiBattista. At this time, I'd like to open to the public. If you have any questions or comments, please state your name and town and limit your questions or comments to 5 minutes or less. And use the microphone over here.
Peter Dumovic, Mendham Township. What a terrific evening to start with in terms of the kids and their achievements that were demonstrated tonight. And just as important, if not more important, Dr. DiBattista's recognition publicly here, and cake to boot. I think we should have that every time. Anyway, I'd like to make a comment about academic performance, student academic performance, and the testing report. And just a comment and then a suggestion for the board for your consideration. At the last board meeting, Dr. Alice Hunter presented results of standardized testing of students last year. And that testing report is now on the district website for the community and folk to review. And that's great. So I applaud that for happening. The results of the various standardized tests are included in that report given by Dr. Hunter and on the website. Reports from SAT, ACT, AP, HSBA, PSAT, PLAN, IB diploma. You have to figure out a dictionary in terms of what these tests are all about. But obviously, standardized tests for kids in high school, standardized tests for our kids at Central High School, Mendham High School, and essentially across the nation. And looking at that report, that testing report, it's an excellent sort of snapshot of student achievement at least as measured by standardized test scores for whatever they're worth. And I think I would put it to all of us that they are worth certainly something. Having said all that, what struck me from that report was really the lack of any sort of analysis of those data. What do I mean by that? I mean in the context of numbers versus something. Numbers versus perhaps other districts, comparable districts. Numbers in terms of how we've done over time, year-by-year performance in any of those measures. So while SAT scores and ACT scores show that our students at Mendham and Central score better than the average in New Jersey, and that's great. I think we probably knew that from the past. And while we saw that plan results show that we do better than the nation in terms of our students at both schools, on that score of plan. That's great. And while we saw in terms of the IB diploma, the number of students that graduate with an IB diploma from both schools is higher than the international average, that's great too. Lastly, in terms of the HESPA, and I have to look at my cheat sheet here to remember what it is, the high school proficiency assessment, there's no comparison there in terms of even how we compare to the state average. And there's also grades from AP scores, but again, there's no comparison of the number of kids that have achieved a 3 or higher compared to percentage-wise the state or the nation. So that's what I mean by what was lacking in terms of any sort of analysis, if you will, of the data. And so it was hard to sort of put these numbers in any sort of context. I think we would all agree that we've got a high-performing district, certainly in many areas. We saw it tonight in terms of art, and certainly we have learners that I think are superb learners. But in terms of student achievement, I think we've also recognized that we've done really well. Our new superintendent has talked about that we're poised for great progress. So I put it to you here in terms of at least my suggestion for the board's consideration. As a parent, but also as a member of the community, and as a taxpayer property owner here, because I think these numbers do mean something in a relative way, that I'd like to see, or at least suggest, that some time be put together to look at these numbers year over year in terms of how we're doing, look at these numbers in terms of comparable districts and comparable schools that are also high-achieving, high-performing schools, like a Milburn, like a Bernards High, like a Chatham, and see how we compare and contrast there. Because what I'd like to see is indeed the areas that we're strong in and areas where we can potentially continue to improve. So the district is certainly committed to excellence, and I think the district is committed to continued improvement. And in that context, not knowing where we actually stand now, rather than just a snapshot of time, and how we've moved over time, I think that's important going forward.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
If I could just say, normally in the past, we've had a testing report has contained about 5 years of comparative data. Much of the information or the analysis that you're suggesting is also contained in there. And we compare ourselves not only to our neighbors who are comparable districts, but globally. And this year, I think we're just running behind, but the full board has asked for similar comparative data to what we've had in the past. So we will be receiving that shortly, and we'll be happy to share it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ann Clark, Chester Township. I'm going to echo many of Peter's comments about taking a look at academic performance. What caught my eye when the test results came out was not something in the high school, except, well, I guess it is somewhat. Chester's 8th grade NJ Ask Math results were troubling to me because 1 in 6 of the students failed the math. And there now are freshmen here at Mendham High School. And I asked Principal Mattias if he knew about those results, and he said no, he had not heard that. So I think there's been a lot of criticism over time of No Child Left Behind, and it's become, 4 bad words. But I think there was very good intent behind the idea of using data to help make us smarter in our decision making and thinking. So I think the flaws of No Child Left Behind were that we didn't do that. We didn't take the next step. We tested, and we didn't go and use that information effectively. And I'd really like to see our district do that, take the information available to us. And I know that standardized tests are an incomplete reflection of all the accomplishments. Tonight's a perfect example of that. But I think there is a lot to, be mined from that information. So, I think one of the board goals for this year was to formulate a long-range plan. So that's whereas that. And whereas there's been an announcement about Mackey bringing strong academic perspective to our educational planning and development. And whereas we've had the recent release of the test performance, I think it'd be good to take a deep and comprehensive look at academics in our district and set some goals, do the assessment, figure out what our strengths and weaknesses are, get action plans with specific goals or measurements that we can track and say, are we making progress? And hopefully that can encompass more than standardized testing, but it's certainly one thing that if all we do is take the plan or the ERB and these things, and we don't then feed back information to our faculty, when we start measuring them on test results, we will have not done them what we should, is leading the district and giving them the best chance for professional development and things they need. So I hope you can engage the community in the process, and I hope you make it one of I'm afraid the board gets caught up in firefighting and doesn't do enough stepping back, whether it's the budget. I could come up with grand ideas about how to do the budget process in a different way, but I realize the constraints you're under and the difficulties in an ideal world versus what you deal with. So I think, though, it's helpful at times to take a step back and have a chance to communicate with the community about what our academic goals are and how we're going to know that we're really moving forward all the time. Thanks.
Thank you, Ann. Any other questions or comments? If there are no others, I will close to the public and move on with our agenda. Does anybody have any items to remove from the consent agenda?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Business operations 8 and governance 1.
Anybody else?
Yes. Program 6. I think it's it's business op 6, I'm sorry.
Business op 6, okay, not program. Okay. Anything else? May I have, will somebody move number 2 in the consent agenda?
So moved.
Tom?
Second.
Thank you, Jackie. We need roll call vote. Marcia?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
Jim? Joe?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Okay. May I have a motion for business ops number 6 on page 3, top of page 3?
So moved.
Thank you, Jim.
Second.
Thank you, Jackie. Discussion.
Yes, I have a question about that one field trip to Seton Hall. Do we know why?
Yes, you called me about that today, and I found out that it is a group of students who are interested in athletic training instruction, and they're invited by Seton Hall University to an all-day event where they learn about athletic training. So it's almost like a career day for them.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? I have a motion for business ops number 8, also on page 3.
So moved.
Thank you, Joe. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Marcia. Discussion.
This is can I have the floor?
Yes.
This is the motion related to what I was talking about earlier. For the benefit of those who don't have it in front of them, I'm going to read the motion. It is, be it resolved that the Wmrhsd Regional High School District Board of Education approve and authorize submission of the tentative budget for the 2012-2013 school year to the county superintendent for state approval. Detailed tentative budgets are available in the board office for public review on or about March 22nd. Today is February 27th. For the reasons that I discussed earlier, I'm going to suggest that the board table this motion very simply because neither the Finance Committee nor the board overall has been given any opportunity to review the detail behind this tentative budget that we would be submitting to the county superintendent if we were to act tonight. And I think it's irresponsible for us to do that without having an opportunity to review the detail on a $50 million school budget. And for that reason, I move to table this motion.
Is there a second to table?
I'll second that.
Discussion on tabling.
If we were to table that, Doug, then what does that do to your deadline to submit?
Well, I can't submit it to the county office until there is board approval.
Do you have a deadline to submit it?
Yes.
It is.
March 5th.
So.
We would need another special meeting. Can I just ask, Jamie, you suggest that it would be a bad idea for us to approve something that we have had limited information about, but as a member of the Finance Committee, how many Finance Committee meetings have you been to? I know you weren't able to make it tonight, but there were 2 other open public Finance Committee meetings that you weren't at, and there have been a lot of opportunities to get information, and I would suggest that if you had called earlier today and asked for the information that was being handed out at the earlier meeting, it might have helped you to be comfortable with this.
I'm glad you asked that question. Let me give you the facts. The facts are 3 hours ago, Finance Committee members received an email from Mary, and that email asked if we could attend a meeting at 6:30 for 30 minutes for the very first time to review this tentative budget, the very first time.
But all of the facts and the supporting data has been discussed at numerous other, I asked you a question, at numerous other meetings. So I'm just asking how many of those meetings you had been to. If you had been to those meetings, not all of this would be new information.
The Finance Committee has been given no opportunity to review this tentative budget or the detail behind it ever at any meeting. And that's what I'm suggesting that we should do to act responsibly.
I would disagree with you on that, but other people can weigh in.
Jamie, how would you know if we were given a chance or not? You haven't been at the last 3 meetings. You weren't there today, which I know was on short notice, but the previous 2 meetings, you arrived at the end of one, and I stayed with the rest of the administration and finance committees to inform you as to what you missed. We stayed for 30 minutes to do that, and then you missed the second one.
You're talking about the 2 public sessions, one at Mendham High School and one at Central High School?
Yes.
In December, when those dates were announced, I told Doug Pekanek that I had a conflict, and I gave him about a dozen other dates that would work for those meetings. And I'm not finished, and he came back to me and he said that the other members of the Finance Committee, specifically you, Tom Rashar, and Kristen Forrester, declined my request to change the date on those 2 meetings.
The dates were announced in October, not in December. They were announced in October, and those meetings there were 14 people that were attending those 2 meetings. It wasn't just Tom and I and you and Anthony and Doug and Kristen as an ex officio. There were staff members, and there were certain nights that did not work. It was always done with a certain night, with a snow night, because this was a very weird winter where we didn't need snow nights, but we didn't have a lot of wiggle room. And the previous year, when we had the 2 open meetings, you missed one of those as well. So this was not unusual. We can only, it's hard to reschedule 14 people. So those dates were given out well in advance.
Jackie, what I'm talking about is the proposal in front of this board tonight. The proposal in front of this board tonight is to approve a tentative budget of $50 million with no detail behind it that neither the Finance Committee nor this board as a whole has had any opportunity to review, with or without absentees at meetings.
Jamie, again, I go back to, this is a tentative budget. It's high level. The county is not looking for the detail at this time. And what they're looking for are the numbers that are on this page in front of you. And the fact that we are asking to approve a 1.67% tax increase, which would impact taxpayers as a 0.72% tax for the next year. That's on a budget of $39,285,434. I'm sorry, not a budget, a tax revenue of that amount on a budget of $41,307,548, excuse me. That's what we are approving, or asking to approve tonight. We're not asking to approve all of the detail because it's not hammered out yet.
I'm hopeful that the members of this board will take into consideration more than a single percentage increase in deciding whether or not to approve a $50 million budget.
We're not asking to approve a $50 million budget. That will come in March.
By that time, it's a fait accompli.
No, absolutely not.
Doug, do you have input on that?
Well, from the time that we submit the tentative until you do the final approval on the last meeting in March, the budget can be changed. It can be increased, it can be decreased. We can move line items. This doesn't seal you in to a final budget.
So if we decided we wanted to do those changes you just detailed, when do we get the opportunity as a board to give you that input other than the next meeting where we'll be voting on it?
Mm-hmm. Well, no, March 12th. March 12th is...
We don't vote until the 26th.
There's a public meeting on March 12th, and then the final meeting is March 26th. Thank you. And that's when the public hearing would occur, meaning that we would present, that's when we normally do our budget presentation is at that meeting. And on that same night, then you would pass a resolution approving the final budget.
Excuse me, doesn't aren't we required to have that budget presentation, that final vote on it, within a certain time frame? There's about a week?
Right, between March 22nd and the 29th, I believe, 28th, 29th of March. That's our window.
I was at both of those public budget meetings, and for the reason that I'm new on the board, I want to be very responsible with my vote. So I made sure I got to those meetings, I took notes, I asked questions, and I still would say I need to be more responsible and get all the information. The state aid numbers just came in. I'm okay with stepping back and making sure it's okay. I have all the information I need. That's a commitment I'll make, that I need that information. I want to be responsible. So if it entails aggravation on my part to come to another meeting, that's okay. I'll do that. I'd prefer more information than less and in a hurried manner.
Approving this submission does not preclude you from getting more information.
I understand that, but the vote is to approve submission of the budget. So it's a big,
Tentative
I think
budget.
it's a big.
Tentative budget.
Yes, I understand. It's a big deal. It's a big vote to me. It's not like number 9. It's not like governance 1. I mean, it's big. So I'm going to be very conservative.
Thank you. Jim?
In general, I try to attend the public meetings when I'm not on the Finance Committee. They only had the ability to attend one this year, but it was the same as the other year, where the administrators go through their budgets line item by line item. We have the page budget appropriations summary. You can see the decreases, increases over the previous year budgets. There were discussion between the committee members and the administrators presenting what they wanted for their budgets. I believe that this is ready to be passed on to the county at this point.
Any other discussion on the motion to table?
Doug, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What percentage of this budget is discretionary?
Less than 10%. 9 to 10%, I believe, is what our, usually what ranges.
And what is your definition of discretionary?
Monies that you can, move around. Principal's budget is to an extent discretionary. It's probably easier to describe the non-discretionary from a standpoint that that's the biggest parts. Utilities, you don't have a lot of discretion there. Salary and benefits. Benefits in particular, very difficult because we don't have control of the market. Salaries, on the other hand, you have a window of opportunity when you negotiate or to control that area. Once you've cast your contracts, until that contract expires, you're locked into those components.
So it's discretionary every 3 years?
Correct, right.
And that's about 70% of the budget?
But,
No, 90.
no.
No.
Discretion.
70%, part of that's benefits.
Salaries and benefits.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on the motion to table? All in favor of tabling the resolution to submit the tentative budget?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 noes, 6 noes. Okay. Motion to table fails. Back to the main motion. Any other discussion on the main motion? Can we roll call the main motion? Marcia?
No.
Jamie?
No.
I'm a yes. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
John's not here. Sorry, Tom?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes. May I have a motion for governance 1?
So moved.
Wmrhsd? Second? Thanks, Dave. Discussion. Yes.
We talked a lot about this at the last meeting, and I'm going to make a motion to amend this for those who don't have the benefit of the motion in front of them. Let me read it. It says that the board adopt the revised West Morris Regional High School District Policy Manual as introduced at the February 13, 2012 board meeting. And I have in front of me a document a couple inches thick, which is a policy manual that we've not been given an opportunity to review, discuss, or comment on. Notwithstanding that, the motion I'm going to make to amend tracks exactly, Kristen, the motion that you made at the last meeting that was approved by the entire board, and that is to take out the language in policy number 9326 related to taping by members of the public of these board meetings. Specifically, Kristen, the motion you made excluded the following three sentences. Number one, that you made and I seconded. Any person wishing to audio or videotape meetings shall provide written notice of their name, address, and telephone number, and will consent to the board at its own expense and upon request to make a reproduction of the recording. Second sentence that I'm proposing be deleted, as Kristen proposed last meeting, is all persons recording board proceedings shall hold the board harmless and indemnify the board against all damage or injury, whether to equipment, to themselves, or to others. And the third sentence is, unless waived by the board, no more than 2 portable videotape cameras operated by not more than 2 persons shall be allowed on a first-come, first-served basis. For those that weren't at the last meeting, my primary concern about this is that it is in violation of the Open Public Meetings Act, and that I doubt that we can legally put these restrictions on members of the public who want to videotape the meeting, and even if we could legally, I think it's a mistake to do that. So, consistent with the motion that was passed at the last board meeting, I'm making a motion to amend by deleting those 3 sentences from our policy manual.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion on the motion to amend. I'd like to first start by just clarifying. I made the motion to remove that language from the other motion at our last meeting, because I knew it was in the policy manual, in the new policy manual. Not because I don't support that language. I think it's important that the board be indemnified if somebody brings in equipment and something's damaged or somebody's injured and it's not our equipment. I think that that's important.
So in other words, it was a subterfuge on your part to take it out.
Subterfuge?
Yes, to take it out of one motion and then leave it in this one.
That's not subterfuge. That is that I knew we were covered, so it was not necessary to duplicate the language. If that confused you, I'm sorry, but...
But you didn't explain that at the last meeting, that was
Did you ask me?
That was your intent.
Did you ask me?
No, I didn't imagine that you would do that.
I'm sorry that I misled you or that you were confused, but that was not my intention.
I thought we tabled that. I'm confused about that. At the last meeting, didn't we?
No.
No, we altered the language.
We altered the language. We removed.
And then why isn't that?
Because that motion at the last meeting was regarding Doug setting up an account to accept donations to pay for taping.
No, but there was more to it.
There was more to it, and I supported or suggested that we remove some of that language because it was duplicative. We didn't need it in that motion if that was troublesome, because it's in the policy.
Yeah, I do remember that conversation, and I was actually taken aback because I supported, I don't like that language, I would vote to take it out, but I think it was Doug who said it's in the policy manual, and that is troubling, even though I would still vote to move the entire policy manual. there's more language in other policies that I've discovered in reading it that I would like to remove. So just as a matter of, I would love to support that motion to take it out.
Can we stay on, right now, we are on the motion to amend. So we're not talking about other policy.
I know, this is all in context. There's other things that I would love to pull out too and say, I'll move the entire policy manual if we can take out policy this and this and this. I don't think it's the way to do it. I would still support moving the entire policy manual and going back through all the sections and really looking at them, because Dave and I have already come to an agreement on some of them that, let's talk about that more. That needs more looking, but I would still support moving the entire manual.
And Jamie, you had suggested we go through each section of the manual.
Right.
I thought it was a good idea.
One tab each meeting. There are 9 tabs in it.
I don't know if you could, there's a lot of meat in that thing. So,
Yeah, that's why I'm concerned about passing it on one fell swoop.
I understand that.
Is there any other discussion on the motion to amend?
When's the last time this was updated?
20 years ago.
Fully updated.
So are we moving forward, shall we say, at least getting somewhere?
Now, what we're saying is we don't know where we're headed because no one's read it, except Dave and Marcia.
How do you know?
How do you know?
Been given sufficient time to.
You haven't, so don't speak for the entire board, please.
I've actually read the first couple pages that show where all the changes are, and I went to those policies and I reread those policies to see what they were about. All the other policies in it were our existing policies. Correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there any other discussion on the motion to amend? All in favor of the motion to amend by removing the language in policy 9326?
Did you say all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
No? Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed? Opposed, okay.
Yes.
Okay. 7 noes, 1 yes. Back to the main motion. Any other discussion on the main motion?
Yeah, Jim, to put into context your last comment, for those that don't have the benefit of the document in front of them, when you said all the changes are listed in the front and everything else is the same.
Highlighted areas.
Right. There are 20 pages, and on each page, there's about 20 policies. So that's about 400 that have been changed.
Do we have a schedule to, we said we're going through each series. Is that every meeting? Does that need a motion that we're going to do that? Or how do we hold ourselves to that?
Our new superintendent with that task.
Report by next Monday, Mackie.
I think we can work at that we can bring policies, and if they need to go back to the policy committee, they can go back and be looked at, and then
I think
policy
it's a reasonable
committee.
request.
Absolutely.
It's just going to be very time consuming.
Yes. Any other discussion? Do we need a roll call on this? We need to vote?
Yeah, she's going to. Go ahead.
All in favor of the main motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? Okay, that's it for our consent agenda. On to new business, or old business, I'm sorry. Is there any old business?
I have some old business. In the past, I've brought up for discussion, reviewing, revising the superintendent evaluation tool. And in a couple meetings ago, Kristen said, well, put together something that shows what you're thinking. So over the last couple weeks, I did work on it, and I just have a one-page sheet to hand out. shows my thinking. Okay. So what you see in front of you, well, I'll wait till everyone gets it.
Enough?
Okay, so what you'll see in front of you is just my thoughts. I'd be happy to hear discussion, your thoughts also, but I have 5 bullet points that I think would be prudent for this board to have, and the evaluation consists of the district performance goals, which would be determined, and what I think is important about those, and perhaps is different than how we've done it in the past, is that every goal needs to have an action plan to achieve it and a way to measure the effectiveness of the plan. So just as an example of a goal could be increase curriculum strength in STEMs, science, technology, engineering, and math. The action plan would be to collect data on standardized test results, use resulting information on weak points to redirect curriculum, and the measurement would be to measure upward progress on advanced proficient scores and the HESPA math scores. Just an example I came up with off the top of my head, but I think what's important is that action plan and a way to measure it. I also included a calendar for progress review, and none of this is really unique thinking on my part. I just looked around at what other things, what other measurements other schools use, what's recommended. And that's an incomplete calendar, but it would just give the board a guideline. Here's what we need to be doing in all these different months through the year to make sure we're hitting our targets.
Marcia?
Okay, can I just go through it and then I'll...
Will it take long?
No. The third part is the assessment of ongoing responsibilities, which is really assessment of the superintendent's job description. So as you can see, the job description is part of the evaluation tool, and you merely go through that, and what we think is important to put in a job description, we're going to measure. And instructional management, community relations, district management, that sort of thing. And then the last thing is a staff survey, which would be online, and you send it out to all the teaching and administrative staff. Participation is anonymous, and we look at the results. So those are my thoughts. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and it's really just a starting point, I would think, for a discussion.
I appreciate.
Very similar to what we already do, other than the staff survey. So go ahead.
I appreciate your efforts. How many superintendent evaluations have you been involved in?
Just one.
Which one?
Just the one I did when I first, in April or May, when I first got on the board.
I think we had done the evaluation at that point.
No, I voted on it.
You voted?
Voted, but you didn't participate in it? Didn't provide the feedback?
I thought I did, yeah. I mean, on some of the ones I wasn't sure, but I mean, at the time when I did it, I said, when I first saw the evaluation tool we use, I thought it was going to be just one part of it, quite frankly. And I was waiting for more, and that was it. So that's what spurred my, my thinking back then was I thought we needed a more comprehensive evaluation tool.
I know that you've looked at what other schools do. Unfortunately, sometimes other schools aren't regional high schools, and even though we use the New Jersey School Board's evaluation plan as a guide to the extent that we can, again, it's probably designed for all types of schools throughout the state, so we do have to modify to what fits our district.
Right, and quite frankly, I would say that an evaluation tool like this could be applied to really any CEO, really. I mean, I don't think it has to be, pardon me?
We're not evaluating CEOs.
Our superintendent is the CEO of our school district.
He's the superintendent of the
I
school
would
district.
say that sort of evaluation is consistent with a leader. How does, the top leader of an organization, what do we think we should be evaluating and looking at. So obviously you disagree.
Marcia,
don't say
the
it.
district performance goals, we do that every year. We set our board goals, we set our district goals. From those, the superintendent draws up his action plans. Those are what we evaluate the superintendent on. We get reporting, while it's not in a formal calendar, we get progress reviews all year long from the superintendent currently. And while we've discovered that some of our job descriptions are out of date, I do have new ones from school boards that we can adopt for all job positions, not just the superintendent. And the only thing that's really looks to stand out to be different here would be the staff survey. Otherwise, this is very similar to what we have done since I've been on the board. Yes?
I think I've been on the board the same number of years as you, the last 4 years. And
I've been on 5, but...
Okay, 5. And I applaud Mrs. Asdale's effort here. And I can tell you, from my vantage point, the 5 years that I've been on the board, we have never done an administrator evaluation as thoroughly and professionally as is laid out by Marcia. And I would absolutely support moving in this direction to start with an adequate evaluation of our new superintendent.
Any other? And then we can move on.
Get some sample evaluations, maybe from school boards. I know we used one.
We
2
used
years
one
ago.
2 years ago from school boards.
Right, there was much more comprehensive. But maybe from, just get a couple that we can look over and maybe pick the best from all of them.
Well, what I love the best about our goals is we have an action plan and a way to measure it. Now, I have a copy of our evaluation here in front of me from last year, and it's nowhere near that. I'm not saying these were bad goals, but I'm saying that a responsible board sets targets and sets ways to measure it.
Marcia, we will be doing that with the merit.
Those are a couple
Merit
goals.
pay
I think we get
5. There are 5 goals for the superintendent. 3 are quantitative, and they are each worth 3.3%. 2 are qualitative, and they have to support the quantitative, and they are each worth 2.5%.
I understand that.
Okay. Can we, this is, thank you for doing this, and this is really thought-provoking, and I think we should continue to get more information, but can we move on in old business to any other topics?
I'm not sure. Do you want to move this? How do you want to proceed with this, Marcia?
Well,
Excuse me, Jamie, you're not the chair. I asked if there was any other information that people would like to share.
Yeah.
In old
I do.
business.
I would like to know how Mrs. Asdale would like to proceed with this.
Yeah, well, I quite frankly had thought there'd be more discussion on it tonight, what people think. If you want to say, even a piece of it, how about the staff survey? I know that would be a concrete, easy thing for us to develop, to add to our evaluation.
What was your intention with the staff survey? What did you hope to gain from that?
I think that if you're evaluating the superintendent, I think it's a big chunk, you're missing feedback and input from the staff. So it's certainly not, when they talk about what percentage of the evaluation would that be, I think it's just feedback to the board. What if we hear all terrific things? That's terrific feedback. What if there's an overriding theme that keeps coming in that we wouldn't have known had we asked? It's not like staff, would come to us with those concerns. So I would just use it as an additional point of feedback.
You didn't really expect us to be able to discuss this tonight since it wasn't on the agenda and we weren't prepared for it.
Well, I'm not asking for, a detailed PowerPoint. I would just, your feedback. Obviously, Jackie, you don't really love it.
I didn't say that.
Well,
There's a lot of effort that needs to be compared to what we've done before, and I don't think anyone is prepared to do that tonight because we've had other concerns, higher priorities. And if you recall, I mentioned I thought we should be doing a board self-evaluation before we start to worry about amending the superintendent evaluation. We haven't gotten to the board self-evaluation yet.
I know.
Is there a deadline by which we have to evaluate the superintendent?
The superintendent who would have been evaluated by a deadline is retiring as of Wednesday.
Okay.
We will not be evaluating Mackie for another year.
Okay.
So we have time.
But I bet you Mackie would like to know how he's going to be evaluated next year, right?
Absolutely. And part of that, we do need to go ahead and do our board self-eval and set our district goals, board goals, district goals, and the supporting action plans, and come up with the qualitative and quantitative measures for the merit bonus that are agreed upon by the superintendent and the board. Is there any other old business? New business?
Yeah, I do have one. I read in the paper about how some school districts have signed up to take part in the Race to the Top, and I would just be curious, I know our school did not, I would just be curious why, what was the reasoning behind not going for that?
Because we're in the process of putting together an evaluation system that the state's going to require us to do. And the feeling among a number of administrators in the county, many of the superintendents felt that applying for that at this moment would be premature because we don't know what the final state requirements are going to be. A number of districts that applied for Race to the Top did it with the notion that they may have put together a system of teacher evaluation that could be scrapped by the state as early as next October. So it seemed to me to be more prudent to find out exactly what the state was asking for and put together a supervision and evaluation system that matches what the state's looking for.
Okay.
I have an item also. At the last meeting, Anthony, I asked about a member of the Menham High School wrestling team who was hospitalized with MRSA, and you hadn't heard about it at that point. I had only heard about it a few hours earlier. I was wondering if you could report to the board on that, and also what corrective action, if any, has been taken to avoid having that happen again.
Yes, I know that the day after I received that information from you, we contacted the medical authorities. The medical authorities gave us a series of protocols that we should follow. The nurses followed up with getting every member of the wrestling team, contacting them, and we followed all of the protocols that were recommended by our doctor within our wrestling room. I know that there was one case, there was a question about whether or not that case happened on our mats or at another place. And you knew everything I'm saying because you've been in contact with RAD by telephone and email, so none of this is news to you.
And what has been done to clean up the room? I'm not aware of what processes have been put in place to clean the room.
I'm not, other than the doctor gave us specific things that we should do in terms of cleaning, specific actions that we should take in terms of inspecting students, and I know that the nurses, in conjunction with the athletic director, under the directions of our doctor, did all of those things. The Department of Health said if there was a second case, call us. What you're doing works fine.
Was a professional brought in to sanitize the wrestling room and the locker room?
Yeah.
I'm not aware that one was. What I'm aware is that some teenage boys used bleach to wipe down the mats. I'm not aware of anything else.
What I'm aware of is that we followed what the doctor told us to do, and the doctor said that we were following correct protocols.
I'm aware that some universities that have college wrestling teams, if a member of the team gets a staph infection or MRSA, which is, they basically clean out the entire room. In fact, I was told over the weekend that if a student has MRSA, they're required to throw out all the furniture in their dormitory room, and the university replaces it because of the seriousness of it and how difficult it is to get rid of it. And I would like to know what has been done in Menham High School Fieldhouse. We have a lot of students, not only wrestlers, cheerleaders, and gym class students that use that room. And I would hate to have another one end up in the hospital or the morgue.
Jamie, if you were so concerned, why did you wait 2 weeks to the next board meeting to bring this
I was hopeful that Anthony
Tension.
was going to let us know the next day, but I haven't heard, so I got the information
You
that I
knew
could.
before any administrator knew. You know now what's happened, and you are, it seems like a bit of grandstanding to me.
Well, let's be clear. We followed exactly the doctor's recommendations. We called the Board of Health. There was not a second case here. The chances are very likely that the case that you're discussing happened at another wrestling mat. You know that.
I don't know that. You never know where it's picked up. But I do know that 2 of my sons wrestled with that boy, and what I'm concerned about is not where he got it, whether he got it in the Menham High School wrestling room or from another team, but to stop the spread of it within Menham High School.
Are you suggesting that we should do something other than what our medical authorities have said?
I'm asking you what has been done to clean the room. You've said you've done what the doctor said. I don't know what that is, and I guess you don't know what that is either.
No, I don't know the specifics. If you had called me before instead of trying to play stump the superintendent, I could have gotten those specifics.
I asked you 2 weeks ago at this meeting.
And you continued to contact the athletic director by phone and by email. You were more on top of this than I was.
I'd say that's true.
Yeah, that's true. And I know that I went the very next day, spoke to the nurses, spoke to the principal, spoke to the AD, and make sure that doctors were there giving us information about this.
Anthony, I'm just hopeful that we don't have another student that ends up in the hospital or the morgue with MRSA.
So am I.
Isn't there already MRSA guidelines in place?
Yes.
And is that being monitored, that we're already following that? I see it even in the staff bathroom.
Doctor said we are doing everything that we're supposed to be doing.
And so someone's actually monitoring that whatever wipe down needs to get done, or I don't really understand all of it, but there's a monitoring process that those protocols are being followed continuously, not just because a MRSA case is here.
And we had a case at Wmrhsd Central that we were afraid was MRSA and that we found out was a staph infection, and that was discovered 2 days ago. And we follow the same protocols at Wmrhsd Central that we do at Wmrhsd Mendham, and we did exactly what the doctor told us to do.
I think we've beaten this one to death. Is there any other new business?
Mac, are you sure you want this guy? Still time.
Mackie, at your first board meeting, I'm going to ask you what the procedure was to
New
clean the
business.
Menham High School field house, and I hope, hey, you've got 2 weeks' notice.
I'd like to open to the public for questions or comments. Please state your name, town. Please try to limit your questions or comments to 5 minutes or less.
Mike Frieda, Mendham High School. The document that Marcia passed out at a public meeting, is the public entitled to receive a copy of that since it was public discussion?
I'm sorry, which?
The document Marcia passed out, which was open for public discussion, it's a public meeting. Aren't we entitled to a copy?
Yes.
Could I get a copy?
Yes. Can we?
Thank you.
Do you have a copy? I'll give you. I'll give you.
Here you go, Mike, take 2.
With regards to the cleanup of the MRSA, I also was interested, and I went to the nurse's office to find out what went on, and it wasn't limited to some of the kids on the team cleaning up. I was told about, the rooms being bombed and the amount of hours that the janitorial staff put in on the job. So there is some, it was handled. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Carol Brady, Mendham Borough. I just wanted to follow up on that. I was in touch with Mr. Baglin on another matter right after that was concerned. When I left here, I went down and worked the food booth. I informed the janitors because they should know that there might be an issue so that they're not mishandling something and injuring themselves. The meeting wasn't even over here. And so they were aware, and in addition to the wrestling room, I know the entire weight room was done as well because I was concerned that young kids work out and from every sport, and you don't know. So they didn't give me any personal information, but they did give me information as to what was done when I called.
Thank you, Carol. Any other questions or comments?
Christine Myers from Mendham Township. I just feel terribly that I've witnessed yet another board meeting that has deteriorated into name calling, and and issues that are so incredibly unimportant to education, in my personal opinion, and that it is, in fact, Dr. DiBattista's last evening with us as superintendent. So, and I feel I would be remiss if I didn't focus on the 34 years of dedication, and that we end on a note that we should end on, which is to thank Dr. DiBattista for the 34 years of dedication and academic excellence that he has given to his students. Okay, I'm one of them, and I'm not really an academic excellent person per se, and I graduated, like 15 years after Mackie. Clearly, math wasn't a strength of mine either. But I think we're missing the point in what I've seen in this discussion. Because what I learned in Tony D's class at the time, and he was still sporting a wonderful chain down the pants of his jeans, was that you could rope kids with that chain. They towed the line. Was that his energy and his passion around education, it was contagious. So I didn't care if you were the worst kid in the class. You wouldn't miss it for the world, because what he wanted to say to you was something you wanted to learn. And you didn't even know what it was yet. And I really don't remember what I was in the Protestant Reformation meeting of the minds, but I do remember being Mikhail Bakunin in the second part, which anarchy is always a good thing. But I also can give a impassioned discourse on how the stirrup changed the Dark Ages and conquered Europe, and I can't go much further, but I can get there. But in addition to his infusion of passion and intelligence, his dedication and compassion to his students was unending. So in my senior year, 2 of us wanted, I don't know why, we wanted to meet with him at 7 a.m. once a week to labor through Bertrand Russell, History of Western Philosophy. Because I know that sounds like fun for everybody. And we did. Week after week, we went through this 850-page book. Me and a student who couldn't have been more different than I was. And that student was brilliant, but incredibly challenged in so many ways that I failed to understand at the time. And when I left school, Dr. DiBattista did not leave him. He worked with him to work through a very bad addiction and to work through some very physical, painful things that this child had to go through. And he got him into school. And he never left him until the day I got the phone call that Ron had ended his life. And Dr. DiBattista never left him. Ron always knew he had that friend. So you can sit here and you can talk about Wmrhsd, you can talk about policy guides, but what I want particularly our students to know, it is not the test scores that you will get. It is not where you graduate from. It is not the company you run that you will be measured by. It is whether or not you had a positive impact on your world, on your sphere of influence, on your family, whether you change them for good. And it doesn't take money to do that. It doesn't even take incredible intelligence at times. But what it does take is selflessness and a sense of others. And that is what my favorite teacher brought me and 34 years of students before and after me. And I hope that this board can understand after he leaves what you had. And I only hope that the 2 of you have an educational experience like I had. And he is the reason I brought my son back to this district. And I sure as heck hope we can move forward together and that we can bring education to the forefront in his honor and for your future. Thank you for everything.
I don't know if anybody has the nerve to follow that. But if you do, you're welcome. If not, then I'll close to the public, and we'll take a brief recess before we go into an executive session. Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes from the January 26th, 30th, 16th, and 22nd executive sessions with the correction to the attendance on the January 30th?
So moved.
But if you do them in,
Thank you, Jackie. I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Marcia. Did you have, all in favor?
yeah, I do have a comment. If we're going to approve them in total, how can we abstain from the ones where certain board members were absent?
You can say you abstain from, give the date.
Now, we have one motion, and the motion is to approve the minutes from all 4 meetings. My suggestion is that we do them separately so that we can vote on them separately.
You can abstain from the minutes for the date of the meeting that you were not in attendance at.
I don't believe that's proper procedure.
Doug?
No, you can abstain. It's like a bill list.
Can you hand the minutes back to me?
All in favor?
Wait a second.
Do you want to do a roll so we can abstain from the ones we want to abstain from?
Why don't you just do it?
The 26th.
Yes. So 26 is when the 3 of us weren't? Yes. So what do we?
Why don't we I make a motion that we
We have to
revise the motion to individual meetings.
to January 26th only. With that one.
Right, to
We have
January
to-
26th
Just to
only.
January 26th.
As I suggested.
We'll second his motion then.
Second it.
Now you need to vote on that motion to
Motion to
amend.
separate, right.
Yes, to separate these out.
All in favor of the motion to separate?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Motion for January 26th executive session minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Tom Richard, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No, it's-
Opposed?
I heard him.
Any abstention? It was Jim Johnson, then Tom Richard.
I heard Dave Lobron.
It's hard to hear.
Go ahead.
Abstain.
Sorry,
I know.
getting late.
Who was
So
it?
you're abstaining on January 26th?
Right.
As Marcia and I assume Joe.
So Joe, Marcia, and Dave are abstaining.
Okay.
Okay. I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the January 30th executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstention? May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the February 16th executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Jim.
Second is 16.
Thank you, Dave. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the February 22nd executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Jackie.
Second.
Thank you, Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions?
When you weren't here?
I was here for that one.
Can I have program number 7? Moved. Program number 7, the board entered into a settlement agreement. Thank you, Dave. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. Roll call.
Yes.
Marcia, thank you. Jamie?
No.
I'm a yes. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Thank you. I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
They're part of the
Thank you, Marcia.
Second.
Take Jamie.
I will.
I'm sorry, who motioned?
Marcia moved.
Marcia.
Jamie seconded. All in favor?
I'm done.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions?
Yeah, you got a few more days.
No, that's all right. I'll be there.
Thank you very much.